Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is KillerHERTZ, and in today's video I'm going to be retrofitting a reversing camera setup made from Mercedes original parts to my 2011 CLS63 AMG. Now generally AMGs are fairly high spec cars with most of the optional extras and so on. However, for some reason the original owner of my car decided it'd be better to fit heated rear seats and a digital TV tuner instead of a reversing camera. Now, as this model of CLS has got a fairly high shoulder line, it can be difficult to reverse into tight spaces with poor rear visibility. However, this camera should help with that. I'm going to detail all the different parts you need and go into details of all the different processes and what needs to be done to fit this. So to start with, I'll go over all the parts which are actually required for this modification and retrofit. Now, it is actually still possible to purchase all this as one entire kit from Mercedes. As you can see here, all of these items are included within it. Starting with the actual module, now this unit communicates with the rear SAM unit, so it activates once reverse has been selected as soon as the reversing lights have been enabled. Next up is the external boot lid trim. Now this trim differs from what's already in place on the car, as it features not only a cutout for the camera unit, but also a weather shield moulded around the actual cutout, as you can see here. Now if you use the existing trim and manually cut out a hole, the camera will not be sufficiently protected, so I would definitely recommend getting this updated trim. And here within this bag is of course the actual digital camera. Now it's not very high resolution by today's standards, but it is the correct one for this car and head unit. Now followed by the entire wiring loom. As its original OEM, it includes all the correct connectors, etc. So this entire process should be just plug and play. And last up is the wiring diagram, which Mercedes handily includes. Now this is extremely useful, if not essential, to use as a guide when locating a free connection on the rear SAM unit. In addition to these parts, you're also going to have to activate the reversing camera, which is an option hidden within your command head unit's menu. Check the video which I've made with instructions on how you do this, either by clicking the top right hand corner of the screen now, or see the video link in the description below. So now to get to work taking apart the car. First up, we're going to need to remove the inner boot lid trim so we can access the wiring loom as well as the clips and screws holding the handle mechanism in place. To do this, you'll need to work your way around the trim, removing the plastic retaining clips from both sides. Now you're going to need to get a dedicated trim removal tool, otherwise you're going to end up damaging each one of the clips. Ultimately, we're aiming to get a cable down to the rear fuse SAM unit box, which is here on the right hand side of the boot behind the trim. Here's the existing trim, which I mentioned earlier. Now it has a hole marked out, however as you can see there's no weather shield, so if you did cut a corner and modify this piece, it wouldn't cover the camera sufficiently and it would allow water to leak into the actual boot. Half an hour or so later, first job done, and the interior trim has been removed. You can see it lying down over there on the garage floor. So what we want to do now is remove all the electronic connectors which hold in the boot lid underside section containing the actual handle mechanism. So all this needs to be disconnected before we can start removing any more. Possibly the trickiest part is freeing up this handle mechanism. Now the plastic shielding plate must be removed before you can continue. Attempting this like I did without any kind of guide or instructions took me a good while to figure out. Here we have all the trim pieces removed with the old handle trim next to the new. Now you can clearly see the differences with the cutout for the camera. I've previously modified my car with a vinyl wrap over the chrome boot lid trim to give the car a kind of more aggressive look. However, as you can see, I've damaged this wrap while taking the handle trim off. No worries though, I'll rewrap this once I've finished this camera install. So it's now time to fit the camera, and here's a good quick look at it. As you may notice, it has foam on its rear side, so it must be installed from the exterior rather than threading it through the inside. I just need to figure out how you correctly clip it into place, but this shouldn't be too difficult. here is a better view. To correctly position it into place, you must initially clip in the bottom side, nearest the boot lid, and then pivot the camera back until it clips securely into place. Again, note the position of the foam. Now once you've heard the loud clip, the camera is secure and it's not going anywhere. And a quick look to see what it looks like from the inside. With the camera now installed and clipped in correctly from the front side, it's now time to reinstall the new trim panel, which covers up all the gaps, adds a weatherproof surround, and also provides a new handle mechanism. Now it's just a case of working your way along the panel, ensuring that all the clips are fully pressed into place. So here we have the cable hanging down from the camera. I now need to securely fasten this within the boot lid hinge mechanism to ensure that it doesn't at any point run foul of any moving parts, become snagged and eventually breaking. Now I could open up the fabric fasteners on the existing wiring loom, however due to the amount of time this is going to take, it could be classed as overkill. Instead I intend on using a series of small cable ties fastened around the main wiring loom, which should be just as good overall. And here we go, with the cabling successfully routed along the existing loom. Now the key here is to allow a little amount of play or movement within the wire so it isn't pulled tight at any position which the boot lid is in, or there's no chance of it running foul on any part of the car. The cable now runs all the way down to the Reassembly unit, ready to be connected up. Speaking of the Reassembly unit, that's the signal acquisition module. Here it is with all the fuses attached. The green section up the top is where I'm going to need to wire up the camera's module to. I'll go into this later in the video. Anyway, here is the other wiring loom which I need to connect up to the car's front dashboard and head unit. Now I need to figure out which way is the best route to take. Generally in the past for aftermarket stereos and amps etc, I've always gone under the door sills. From the back to the front, then under the driver or passenger carpet up into the dashboard. However, I'm not entirely sure that this loom appears to be long enough, so I might have to take a different route. So back in the boot, here's the camera cabling, which as I mentioned earlier, I've routed along the side of the existing loom on the hinge of the boot lid, ending with a connector here. As I mentioned earlier, the part I'm interested in is the green section at the top, as there are a couple of free connection sockets up there which I can feed the actual cable into. This cable here is going to the front of the car, to the head unit, and is the actual cable that needs to go into the SAM. With the SAM unit carefully unmounted from the side of the car, and also with help from the wiring diagram, you'll need to connect up the relevant cables into the free connector bay, so that the camera is given the correct signal once the car is in and out of reverse. Additionally, you'll also need to connect the earth cable up to the nearest earth point on the chassis. Luckily there's one right below. Okay, so now to tackle the part which I haven't been looking forward to, the front dashboard section. So I need to access the rear of the command head unit, and after a little bit of research it appears in order to do this, first I must remove the large dashboard fascia. Now the fascia is held on by a bolt at one end by the window and a clip at the other, and the clip requires the use of a punch in order to release it. Once you press the punch in, it should release the entire unit like so. As my car is fitted with the piano black dashboard trim, I'm going to have to be extremely careful not to scratch the surface when removing this. Now before you can fully remove this trim, you also need to disconnect the 3 different wiring connectors for the IWC clock, the backlights on the vents, as well as the colour changing LED bar which is hidden within the trim. That's worth noting, if you happen to ever find an IWC clock in a scrapyard, these are only available for AMG models, you should be able to fairly easily retrofit it to a non-AMG model just by doing the same trim removal as here. With the dashboard fascia disconnected and out of the way, all that's left is to unscrew the two Phillips head screws located at the top of the unit and then simply pull it towards you. So after a little bit of research, it turns out that the correct route for the cabling is in fact to go via the centre console. Which does make a little bit of sense when you think about it. So I completely removed the rear centre console and was able to keep the front one still in place. All I needed to do with the cabling once I got towards the front was lift it underneath between the carpeting and the actual console and pop in the wiring inside the void. This saves a huge amount of time and energy, so I don't actually have to remove the centre console whatsoever. Once all this cabling is in place, all I do is simply thread the wire through the back of the dash into the command unit. Then as soon as I finish feeding through the wire, all I need to do is just tuck the carpet back under and make sure that the cable's not snagging on anything. Okay, so now all I need to do is figure out the cabling at the back of the command unit. Initially I thought this was going to be dead simple. However, upon first attempt to get it working, it resulted in a black screen like so. And I'm pretty certain this was because I had the optional digital TV pack as well as the iPod media interface options fitted to my car. Now I've just swapped over the green video cables. The car was set for iPod video. Yeah, Google it. That was a thing around 10 years ago. So since I've swapped them over, should now all be good. And not forgetting to reconnect this white power lead. I'll just push the command unit back so it's roughly in place. And now it's time to fire up the car to see if this all works. Okay, so now to pop the car into reverse. Nothing appears to be happening. Oh yeah, it would help if the actual unit was switched on, eh? Brilliant. As you can see, the camera is not just working, but it's automatically switching on as soon as I place the car into reverse. And likewise, it's switching off once the car's back into drive. As I mentioned at the start of the video, the camera resolution isn't anywhere as good as what you get on brand new cars, nor does it have the guidelines appearing on the display. Now unfortunately it's not possible to enable these guidelines on the Command NTG4 system which is fitted here, but if you do this retrofit on the NTG 4.5 and newer, they will appear on screen. So here we are an hour or so later, with all the boot lid and boot trim refit back into place. With the only thing left to restore the SAM and fuse box covers back and it's job done. But just before I do that though, I wanted to show you how I've left all the cabling and it's all cable tied up in place. I've also positioned the module so it's easy to get to if for whatever reason I should need to access it in the future. I can now do this without having to remove any trim whatsoever. And another look at the actual camera now it's in place, with its new surround complete with weather shield. As I've carefully positioned the wiring within the boot lid hinge, it's not running foul of any of the moving parts, and you can see that the boot lid can open and close without any issues whatsoever. You'd never know that this has been retrofitted. And now one final shot once everything's finished and put back together. As soon as you put it into reverse, it switches on. And of course switches off as soon as you put it back into drive.
And there we have it, a fully installed, integrated reversing camera setup made with the Mercedes original parts. Now looking at the car from both the interior and the exterior, you'd never realise that I'd retrofitted this and it didn't come with the car from new. Now the last thing I recommend you doing is getting in contact with a company who can actually upgrade your VIN number to reflect that you've added the camera to the car. Now what I mean by that is that if Mercedes, for example, search for your VIN number, they can see all the options which are listed against it, and it will now show that the camera's been added to the car as such. Now if you want this modification doing yourself and you live in the UK, please get in contact with the details on my channel. Also, if you have any other modifications that you'd like to be done, get in contact and I can let you know if that's possible or not. Now, if you enjoyed this video, please click on the like button, and if you haven't done already, click on the subscribe button and bell icon so you're notified as soon as I upload any videos. As always, thanks so much for watching. Cheers.